Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. Bai Xiaochun sighed, both sympathizing with Night Crypt and admiring his readiness to give and take. No wonder he became a spy. He's really quite extraordinary. Even just thinking about that girl's face left him sighing. Before long, he was in Night Crypt's Immortals Cave, which was located alongside several other intersect disciples' Immortals Caves. It was a simple cave, which led Bai Xiaochun to understand even more clearly how rough a life Night Crypt had in the sect. It was only about 10% as large as Bai Xiaochun's cave in the Spirit Stream sect, and didn't even have an antechamber, let alone a lake or a pill-concocting workstation. It was nothing more than a stone chamber with a bed and a meditation mat. How did he survive such misery? He thought. Shaking his head, he sat down cross-legged to meditate. Outside, the sun was setting. Back in the Spirit Stream sect, the sect would begin to quiet down at around this time, as disciples settled down to rest for the night. But the Bloodstream sect was different. As evening fell, Bai Xiaochun could hear screams echoing out in the air. Apparently, disciples took advantage of the darkness to fight each other with renewed vigor. According to sect rules, disciples weren't supposed to kill each other, but other than that, anything was permitted. As such, the darkness of night was when the true brutality of the sect shone through. Bai Xiaochun was having a hard time adjusting to an environment that was so different from the Spirit Stream sect. Taking a deep breath, he refrained from stepping outside, and even carefully set up some traps at the entrance of the Immortals Cave. Only then did he settle down cross-legged again to ponder his next step. On the way to the Bloodstream sect, he'd made more inquiries of imposter Night Crypt, and came to learn that the relic of eternal indestructibility was located on the middle finger of the huge hand, which was called Middle Peak. The upper finger of Middle Peak was where the Grand Elder resided, and was a place forbidden to intersect disciples. After all four of the mountain peaks were set aside for Foundation establishment experts only. Intersect disciples like Night Crypt were restricted to the area on the back of the hand. As for the upper finger area, it couldn't even be accessed by the ordinary elders and Dharma protectors. That was one reason why imposter Night Crypt had never been able to even get close to the relic, and also why he wanted to reach Foundation establishment. Only then would he be able to pick one of the 4 mountain peaks to reside upon. Foundation establishment is the first step, Bai Xiaochun thought. I'll pick Middle Peak and then proceed to step 2, which is becoming a Dharma protector. It's too bad I can only pretend to be at Mortal Dao Foundation establishment. Reaching Earthstring Foundation establishment would be too much of a stretch. Otherwise I could become an elder. After becoming a Dharma protector, I need to become the Grand Elder. That's step 3, and also the final step. At that point I'll be able to get access to the relic of eternal indestructibility, which is beneath the Immortals Cave of Middle Peak's Grand Elder. Bai Xiaochun took a deep breath. He knew that reaching his goals was going to take some time. To rise up from being an ordinary intersect disciple all the way to the position of Middle Peak Grand Elder would be a long path to walk. However, there was nothing impossible about it. Having set his goals firmly in mind, Bai Xiaochun closed his eyes and began to practice cultivation. Ignoring the Violet Chi Heavenspan incantation for the time being, he focused on the Undying Live Forever Techniques volume of the Undying Heavenly King. He was very curious to see if cultivating the technique here would be any different than doing so in the Spirit Stream sect. The instant he unleashed the Undying Heavenly King, his body shivered. Back in the Spirit Stream sect, practicing the Undying Heavenly King led to a terrifying wastage of vital energy. Without precious materials and a vast supply of medicinal pills on hand, it was almost impossible. But when he cultivated it here, blood chi rose up from the ground and poured into his body, rapidly replenishing his vital energy and enabling him to cultivate the technique even more quickly. The next day, a tremor ran through him, along with a pulsing sensation. He could already tell that he was stronger than before. His eyes snapped open, and they shone with delight. This place is like a paradise. He ran his hand along the ground, which was like running it along the undying skin of the giant. His heart swelled with excitement. The Undying Live Forever technique really is extraordinary. This giant didn't cultivate it to the absolute peak, which was why he died. Even after dying, though, his fleshly body has remained behind for countless years after his death. It didn't rot or anything, and actually ended up becoming the foundation of a sect. That just goes to show you how incredible the Undying Live Forever technique is. With that, he continued his cultivation. Time passed. 4 days went by, in which Bai Xiaochun would go out when it was light to familiarize himself with the Bloodstream sect. As he did, he would get more information from imposter Nightcrypt, and began to commit the faces of the inner sect disciples to memory. He also worked on his own facial expression, getting it to look more and more ferocious. Soon he realized that emanating a murderous aura required a bit of talent, which he immediately began to work on. He also rehearsed his laugh until it sounded far more sinister and terrifying than before. However, Nightcrypt had already progressed as high as an inner sect disciple could go, and was only a step away from Foundation establishment. As far as most people were concerned, he was almost as powerful as Immortal Dao Foundation establishment cultivator, and was someone none of the other inner sect disciples would dare to provoke. Days passed, and no incidents occurred. One day, Bai Xiaochun was cultivating the undying heavenly king in his immortal's cave, when his expression suddenly flickered. Looking up, he put on the most ferocious and sinister look he was capable of. Eyes shining with piercing light, he looked out of the entrance of the immortal's cave. Before long, a voice could be heard outside. "Junior brother Nightcrypt, it's me, Zhao Wuchang. Please come out for a moment." Bai Xiaochun immediately asked imposter Nightcrypt about Zhao Wuchang, and learned that he was one of the other disciples who had gone to the fallen sword world. Continuing to look as cold and sinister as possible, he emerged from the immortal's cave radiating a murderous aura. A few meters away from the entrance was a middle-aged man. "What do you want?" Bai Xiaochun said coolly. He vaguely remembered Zhao Wuchang as being one of a group of bloodstream sect disciples who had ambushed him, then had been scared off after he started killing them. Zhao Wuchang's face was deathly pale, and at the same time, fierce and sinister. He very much resembled a wolf that was ready to pounce at any moment. He looked Bai Xiaochun up and down, then gave a perfunctory smile and said, "Junior brother Nightcrypt, I trust you've been well since the last time we saw each other. I'm not here for anything particularly important. Those of us who failed in the Fallen Sword world are getting together to exchange information and discuss how to reach Mortal Dao Foundation establishment. Since you're back too, Junior brother Nightcrypt, I figured I might as well invite you to come as well." Zhao Wuchang, as well as everyone else who had failed in the Fallen Sword world, were all in a very awkward position. They were stuck between the inner sect and Foundation establishment, and had no hope of reaching Earthstring Foundation establishment. As such, they were left with no other option than to pursue Mortal Dao Foundation establishment. Unfortunately, Mortal Dao Foundation establishment required a Foundation establishment pill, and to get a pill like that in the Bloodstream sect required a disciple to pay a bitter price. Therefore, the survivors of the Fallen Sword world had formed an alliance, and Zhao Wuchang had come here with the express purpose of asking Nightcrypt to join them. "Oh really?" Bai Xiaochun replied. After a moment of thought, he nodded. Getting into this group would get him access to more information, which would surely be of help in the days to come. Seeing that Bai Xiaochun had agreed, Zhao Wuchang laughed, and then led him through the sect to the location of the gathering. As they walked along, he looked over occasionally at Bai Xiaochun, and mused that this Nightcrypt seemed quite different from the Nightcrypt he remembered. His murderous aura was more powerful, and the sinister look in his eyes even more profound. Nightcrypt might not have succeeded with Earthstring Foundation establishment, Zhao Wuchang thought, but escaping Bai Xiaochun alive was no easy task. Although they kept a healthy distance between them as they walked along, they chatted a bit about some random matters. When they were about halfway to the gathering, all of a sudden, the sky began to rumble as if with thunder. A blood-colored mist pulsed out into the area, surging like waves on the ocean. Up above, several Foundation establishment cultivators who had been flying past stopped in place and cleared a path, expressions of respect on their faces. Bai Xiaochun looked up in shock. Not too far off in the distance, within the blood mist, a blood-colored palanquin appeared. It was fully 30 meters tall, and was surrounded by a host of vengeful spirits who emitted soundless screams. Carrying the palanquin on their shoulders were 8 3-meter-tall gargoyle-like ghosts who emanated black mist. Their skin was green, and they radiated fluctuations similar to a Foundation establishment cultivator, along with sinister coldness. On either side of the blood palanquin were rows of palace maids wearing blood-colored gowns. They were beautiful, but completely expressionless, and carried burning lanterns in their beautiful hands. They almost seemed to be clearing a path for the blood palanquin as it made its way through the mists. It was really an astonishing sight. Even Bai Xiaochun was completely shaken, and his immediate reaction was to assume that a patriarch was coming. However, he quickly realized that seated inside of the blood palanquin was a young woman. She wore a crimson gown, and her long hair rustled in the breeze. It was impossible to see her face because she wore a blood-colored mask, which was decorated with a plum blossom. Her chin rested on her hand as she gazed off into the distance. As for her cultivation base, it was in the foundation establishment stage, and the pressure from the spiritual power that emanated off of her contained traces of multiple tide flows, which caused the blood mist to seethe and churn. That meant that this young woman had reached Earthstring Foundation establishment. Bai Xiaochun's eyes went wide with envy. He hadn't been able to go around in such style in the Spirit Stream sect. The fact that Bloodstream Sect Foundation establishment cultivators got such treatment left him gasping. When Zhao Wuchang saw Bai Xiaochun staring at the blood palanquin, his heart flip-flopped. "Hey, do you have a death wish?" he whispered. "Bow your head. If you're not careful, young lady Shui Mei will dig your eyes out." She reached 9 tide flows in the Lone Hell Pocket realm. If he wasn't interested in Bai Xiaochun joining his alliance, he would never have said anything. Young lady Shui Mei? Bai Xiaochun suddenly recalled Shu Baosai mentioning a chosen from the Bloodstream sect with that very name. Bowing his head, he looked around to see all the other inner sect disciples in the area doing the same. A trifling Earthstring Foundation establishment cultivator gets to be called young lady? I'm a Heavenstring Foundation establishment cultivator, and I don't get to be called young lord in the Spirit Stream sect. Irritated and envious, Bai Xiaochun took advantage of the moment to ask Imposter Nightcrypt what he knew about Shui Mei. Imposter Nightcrypt was trembling in fear because of Shui Mei, but once he heard Bai Xiaochun's question, he immediately launched into an explanation. Young lady Shui Mei has a very impressive background. She's the only daughter of the most recently promoted of the Bloodstream sect's 8 patriarchs, Patriarch Limitless. She has shocking latent talent, and is even more famous than Song Ke. When she was in Qi Condensation, she spent most of her time cultivating on Ancestor Peak, and rarely came outside. She must be out and about in the sect now because she's reached Foundation establishment. Patriarch Limitless originally came from Middle Peak, so word has it that young lady Shui Mei was always supposed to be an elder there. Presumably, she's going to try to fight for the position of Middle Peak Bloodmaster. Bai Xiaochun was already struck somewhat speechless by what he was being told. In every generation, Imposter Nightcrypt continued, the Bloodstream sect has 4 Bloodmasters, 1 for each mountain peak. The fighting over the position on the other 3 peaks has already ended, but the position on Middle Peak is still open. Now that young lady Shui Mei has reached Foundation establishment, her next step will be to vie with the Middle Peak Grand Elder to take the status of Bloodmaster. If Song Ke had reached Heaven Dao Foundation establishment, he would have qualified for the position, but since he's only at the Earthstring level, the Song clan won't let him go up against his aunt. His aunt? Bai Xiaochun asked, shocked. Yeah, replied Imposter Nightcrypt. Middle Peak Grand Elder Song Junwan is Song Q's aunt. Suddenly, his tone turned even more enigmatic than before. Senior Bai, since we're talking about Bloodmasters, there's a secret I need to tell you. Did you know that there's a position even higher than Bloodmaster? Well, of course there's the Blood Ripper level, but there's something even higher than that. I'm pretty sure it's even above the Patriarch level. Have you heard of it? Bai Xiaochun couldn't help but be intrigued by the Imposter Nightcrypt's mysterious tone of voice. What is it? He asked. Imposter Nightcrypt cleared his throat and then proudly went on to say, according to the legends, above the Patriarch level is the Blood Devil. Blood Devil? Bai Xiaochun's heart began to pound. It was a title that seemed completely domineering. Even just hearing it mentioned caused his skin to crawl, almost as if he had seen a real devil. HMPH. See how powerful the Bloodstream sect is. Let me tell you, anyone who can get a blood crystal from one of the mountain peaks of the Bloodstream sect can become a Bloodmaster. The exception is Ancestor Peak, of course. As for the blood crystals, they come from the body of the Blood Ancestor, in the Heavenspan River, whose holy hand serves as the foundation of the entire sect. According to the legend, the body of the Blood Ancestor doesn't just contain blood crystals, it also contains a secret legacy. Whoever takes that legacy will become the Blood Devil, and will lead the Bloodstream sect into founding a new legend. Of course, it's just a legend. Don't take it too seriously. A lot of people in the sect think it's just a story. Imposter Nightcrypt sighed. Bai Xiaochun took a deep breath, and his heart thumped with excitement. Most other people might think that the legend was nothing more than a story, but he didn't believe that. As far as he was concerned, it was entirely likely that the giant blood ancestor beneath the Heavenspan River might have an extraordinary legacy waiting to be taken. By this point, the blood palanquin had made its way off into the distance in the direction of Ancestor Peak. The Foundation establishment cultivators gradually dispersed, and everyone down on the ground breathed sighs of relief. Zhao Wuchang's eyes glittered with envy. You've really got guts, he said. It's a good thing young lady Shui Mei didn't see you looking at her. She definitely would have dug your eyes out if she had, and maybe even beaten you to death. So overbearing. Bai Xiaochun said with a nod. Inwardly, he couldn't help but feel a bit of disdain, but he didn't let it show on his face. With that, Zhao Wucheng led the way to the meeting. Near the border of the back of the hand was an immortal's cave belonging to a disciple who had gone to the Lone Hell Pocket realm but failed to gather enough earth string energy to form even a single tide flow. Although he had failed, his cultivation base had improved some, and he ended up being known as one of the top disciples among those who had failed. As soon as Bai Xiaochun entered the immortal's cave, he saw a dozen or so other disciples in the great circle of qi condensation, all of them angrily complaining to each other. If ever get a chance, I'm definitely going to kill that Lin Mu from the Pillstream sect. The only reason I failed was because he took so much earth string energy. Lin Mu really is vicious. I heard that, to advance his cultivation, he actually planted Dao seeds in other Pillstream sect disciples. He brought a whole generation of disciples to ruin for his own benefit. Lin Mu might be bad, and Shui Fang from the Profound Stream sect is pretty vicious, but they're basically ants compared to the most infuriating person of all. Bai Xiaochun from the Fallen Sword Abyss. That Bai Xiaochun is a true devil. He's fiercer than anyone in the Bloodstream sect. Only a few people came back alive from the Fallen Sword Abyss. Can the other two holy lands compare to that? I heard that Bai Xiaochun cuts people down as casually as scything wheat. He's so overbearing he even drinks their blood after he kills them. All he has to do is bump you, and you explode. When Bai Xiaochun walked in to hear people talking about him, his heart thumped, but after reminding himself that he was there as Night Crypt, he calmed himself and joined the group. The other disciples nodded in greeting, and continued to tell stories about Bai Xiaochun. Bai Xiaochun is my mortal enemy for life, Zhao Wucheng said, clenching his hands into fists so hard that veins popped out on them. Even as he gritted his teeth in anger, lingering fear could be seen in his eyes. Don't worry, elder brother Zhao, one of the disciples said comfortingly. I heard the sect leader has already put an official bounty out on Bai Xiaochun. Whoever brings in his head will be rewarded with a precious treasure, and will also get a gold core fruit. The other disciples seemed excited at the prospect, but Bai Xiaochun's eyes went wide, and his heart began to pound even harder. Gold core fruit? He thought. That can significantly increase the chances of reaching core formation. This Bloodstream sect is too vicious. Even as he gasped inwardly, another of the Bloodstream sect disciples chuckled coldly and said, that's nothing. A few days ago I heard that the 3 great blood masters were dispatched to hunt down Bai Xiaochun. If he dares to step out of the Spirit Stream sect, he'll be killed beyond the shadow of a doubt. Even as everyone in the Immortals cave was grinding their teeth and cursing, people realized that Bai Xiaochun hadn't said anything. Zhao Wucheng looked over in surprise. Junior brother Night Crypt, why haven't you chimed in? You almost got killed by Bai Xiaochun. What do you think about him? Everyone turned to look at Bai Xiaochun. Bai Xiaochun had been trembling inwardly with fear, but as soon as he heard Zhao Wucheng address him, he stuck his chest out and smacked it with his palm. Expression fierce to the extreme, and eyes completely bloodshot, he said, I'll tell you how things stand between me and Bai Xiaochun. In the end, either he'll be dead, or I will. Don't even talk about Bai Xiaochun in front of me. My entire purpose in life is to put him to an untimely end. He then continued to express his determination to kill Bai Xiaochun, his wording growing more and more vicious. The other disciples started to nod, and some of them, including Zhao Wucheng, felt like he was expressing their sentiments perfectly. The conversation continued, and soon the topic changed, whereupon Bai Xiaochun breathed an inward sigh of relief. The Bloodstream sect really was proving to be a dangerous place, and he had already begun to miss the Spirit Stream sect. At one point, there was a lull in the conversation, whereupon the owner of the Immortals Cave, the most powerful of the disciples present, looked around and then said, There's something important I need to tell you all. I've made some inquiries, and learned that the sect has already decided what to do with those of us who failed in the Foundation Establishment Holy Lands. Apparently, they're going to give us another chance. Instantly, the other disciples looked at him with serious expressions. Assuming it's a chance to reach Mortal Dao Foundation Establishment, he continued, then that means we would need a Foundation Establishment pill. Most likely, this opportunity will come in the form of a trial by fire in which we compete for that pill. I was also told that not everyone will get a chance to participate in the trial by fire. Before it starts, we will be given missions by the sect, and only those who complete their mission will be qualified to join the competition. Bai Xiaochun blinked, and then pretended to look both thoughtful and sinister at the same time. The owner of the Immortals Cave looked around at everyone, eyes flashing, then continued, Friends, don't forget that we aren't the only ones who failed in the Holy Lands. There are some loners out there who refused to join our team. We need to join forces to eliminate them, and make sure that one of us gets the Foundation establishment pill. It was impossible to say what people were actually thinking, but on the surface, everyone seemed to support the idea. After voicing their assent, they chatted some more about sect news before dispersing. Bai Xiaochun walked along through the sect, the sky above him slowly growing dark. As he thought about the matter of the trial by fire, he realized that he should try to figure out a way to prevent the others from successfully reaching Foundation establishment. For all intents and purposes, the Bloodstream sect was the enemy of the Spirit Stream sect. As he strolled along thinking, his eyes suddenly flashed, and he spun around, right hand shooting out to grab a person who had been walking behind him. That person hadn't anticipated that he would be so quick, and failed to evade his hand. However, what Bai Xiaochun ended up grabbing was that person's chest. "You naughty devil, what, you want to do it right here?" It was a middle-aged woman, her face crisscrossed with scars. One of the scars even ran from the top of her forehead all the way through both of her lips. Standing there with the moonlight spilling down onto her, she almost looked like a poltergeist. Her cultivation base was in the 10th level of qi condensation, and a flirtatious look could be seen in her eyes. Bai Xiaochun stared in shock, and then quickly pulled his hand back. "Well, that's fine," the woman said. "If you want things like that, I'll follow your lead." She cocked her eyebrow coquettishly, and was just about to remove her garments when Bai Xiaochun fled in the opposite direction. "Damn it, Night Crypt," he said, "how many girlfriends do you have in this sect?" The woman called out for him to come back, but Bai Xiaochun didn't even stop running. "I'm not really sure," Imposter Night Crypt replied in a fearful tone. "Surviving in the Bloodstream sect isn't an easy thing. Over the years, I hooked up with anyone who could give me medicinal pills." Bai Xiaochun's eyes went blank. Back in his Immortals cave, Bai Xiaochun sat there scowling and sighing. He wasn't sure exactly what to think about Imposter Night Crypt. On the one hand, he felt a bit sorry for him. However, having taken over his identity, he had to deal with the possibility that he might have some sort of relationship with any female disciples he ran into. If they were pretty, he might even think about acknowledging their affections. Unfortunately, none of the female disciples who would willingly hand medicinal pills over to Night Crypt were very good looking at all. "It's a good thing nobody knows who I really am. Otherwise my true reputation might be irreparably stained." Sighing, he decided that in the future, he would do his best to stay indoors. With that, he began to practice cultivation. Normally speaking, he wouldn't work so hard at cultivation, but the benefits of working with the undying Heavenly King in this place were too good to not take advantage of. He knew that he had an unprecedented opportunity here, and it couldn't be abandoned. After some thought, he even tried to use the Undying Live Forever technique to produce a drop of true undying blood. Unfortunately, undying blood came from the final volume, and at this point, all he could do was absorb blood chi from the area. It was impossible to form it into undying blood at this point. Even still, he was very excited at the prospects laid out in front of him. He also surreptitiously cultivated the Violet Chi Heavenspan incantation, continuing to melt the Heavenspan river water that was in his spiritual sea. His true cultivation base was making constant progress. Furthermore, his Heavenspan Dharma Eye, which was hidden by the powers of the mask, was also becoming more powerful. What he anticipated most, though, was the mountain-shaking bash. "After reaching the power of 10 mammoths, I can form the Berserk Ghost Body. Then I'll have completed the first level of the Undying Heavenly King." As he continued to work with the Undying Heavenly King volume and absorb blood chi, he felt his power growing, and it filled his heart with anticipation. "In a few days, I should have the power of 2 of those primeval mammoths. I'm already getting close to the power of 10. And I'm only on the back of the hand. Once I get onto one of the fingers, I should progress even more quickly." In his excitement, he thought about how the 5 mountain peaks of the Bloodstream sect all had blood waterfalls. Presumably, if he practiced cultivation near a blood waterfall, his progress would be incredible. Sighing, he couldn't stop thinking about how the Bloodstream sect really was his own personal holy land. He hadn't abandoned his work with protomagnetic power and the human-controlling grand magic. Although he hadn't performed any experiments recently, he had spent a lot of time thinking about and analyzing the subject. A month flew by. During that time, he never left his Immortals cave. However, he was able to observe the area outside, and frequently saw Bloodstream sect disciples fighting each other. At one point, he even saw a disciple get killed not too far away from his Immortals cave. If that had happened in the Spirit Stream sect, it would have been a huge deal. But in the Bloodstream sect, it didn't cause much of a commotion. However, he did hear from someone passing by that the person who had killed the other disciple had been summarily executed. After all, the Bloodstream sect allowed fighting, but not killing, and they strictly enforced their rules. Anyone who crossed the line would meet a brutal end. It's like they're raising scorpions. Bai Xiaochun thought. Although the Bloodstream sect seemed chaotic and without rules, the truth was that there was an order to it. A few more days passed, and word was passed down that an arrangement had been made for those who failed in the Foundation Establishment Holy Lands. Just as the disciple had said in the meeting, they would have a chance to join a trial by fire to reach Foundation Establishment. To qualify for the trial by fire, they had to accomplish a mission set forth by the sect. Each person received a different mission, and Bai Xiaochun's was to go to Corpse Peak and refine a corpse. Bai Xiaochun found the nature of the mission somewhat revolting. However, despite the fact that the mere idea of working with corpses was disgusting, he couldn't change the task. If he wanted to eventually get to that relic of eternal indestructibility, he would have to grit his teeth and accept the mission. That was the only way he could get into the trial by fire, get the Foundation Establishment pill, and reach Foundation Establishment. Then he could choose to become a Dharma protector on Middle Peak. On his way to the Bloodstream sect, he had often thought about showing up as an Earthstring Foundation Establishment expert. Although some of the disciples who escaped from the fallen sword world might have seen Nightcrypt be killed, there were ways to explain how he was now alive. After all, everyone had life-saving magics. However, if he showed up with an Earthstring Foundation Establishment cultivation base, that would be a different matter. Despite the chaos in the fallen sword world toward the end, everyone had been paying very close attention to the Earthstring energy and who was absorbing it. Returning to the sect as an Earthstring Foundation Establishment cultivator would have been too suspicious, so in the end, he abandoned the idea. The next day at sunrise, Bai Xiaochun left his Immortals cave in high spirits. Carrying the mission jade slip with him, he headed toward Corpse Peak. It was only with that jade slip that he could actually enter Corpse Peak. There were lots of corpse refineries on Corpse Peak, even some at the base of the mountain. That was exactly where Bai Xiaochun needed to go to accept his assigned mission. Even from a distance, he could see the corpse refinery that was his destination. It was a huge building, cylindrical and pitch black. Noxious black smoke belched out of the top of the building to rise up into the sky. There were numerous entrances and exits to the building, with inner sect disciples going in and out of them constantly. Grave expressions could be seen on the faces of the disciples who left the building, and their skin was pale, as if they hadn't seen the light of day in years. They were people who, unlike Bai Xiaochun, had taken the initiative to accept corpse refining missions from the sect for the purposes of cultivation and study. As he walked up to the corpse refinery, he suddenly caught sight of someone familiar. It was Xu Zhaoshan, who stood there at the main gate leading to the refinery, his hands clasped behind his back. His cultivation base emanated the fluctuations of Earthstring Foundation Establishment, and he had 3 grim-looking bodyguards standing behind him as he reprimanded several of the inner sect disciples. 1. Bai Xiaochun befriended Xu Zhaoshan in Chapter 152. Do you know how much I paid to buy this corpse refinery from the sect, fools? This place is mine. I had to sell all of my other properties to afford it. If I don't make enough profit to buy paper talismans, you people are going to be sorry. I can't believe you destroyed one of my corpses. It might have been nothing more than an ordinary corpse, but it was still worth something. I'm warning you, the lot of you had better pay me back, otherwise I'll turn you into corpses to be refined. The inner sect disciples were trembling, their faces pale as they immediately admitted their failures. Finally, Xu Zhaoshan waved his hand in irritation to dismiss them. A dark expression on his face, he glanced around the area and caught sight of Bai Xiaochun. What are you doing here? You can't just come and go as you please around here. Bai Xiaochun took a moment to compose himself. If Xu Zhaoshan had dared to talk to him in such a way in the fallen sword abyss, he would have made short work of him. But now, all he did was wave his right hand, sending the mission jade slip flying toward him. Xu Zhaoshan frowned as he examined the jade slip. Then he looked back at Bai Xiaochun. I remember you. You were there when we were all fighting Bai Xiaochun. So, you made it out alive after all. His expression softened a bit. He had mixed feelings about everything that had happened in the fallen sword abyss. He still admired Bai Xiaochun from the Spirit Stream sect, and when he thought about how they had fought and conned each other, he couldn't help but sigh. That guy is definitely the jewel of the Spirit Stream sect now, he thought, shaking his head. Alright, come on inside. Considering we're both veterans of the fallen sword abyss, I'll give you a few tips about corpse refining. As Xu Zhaoshan led the way, Bai Xiaochun put a sinister expression onto his face and followed. Before long, they were in one of the private rooms inside the corpse refinery, which was usually referred to as a corpse cave. The The cylindrical chamber wasn't very large. 9 oil lamps emanated a mysterious light that nevertheless failed to dispel the grim darkness. In the middle of the room was a deep cistern. The water was the color of blood and looked bizarre and fantastic. Floating there in the water was a dead person. The corpse belonged to a burly man with a vicious expression on his face. He didn't look like a kind person in any way, and there was a fatal wound on his forehead. The skin around the wound had withered significantly, transforming into a pattern that resembled a plum blossom. Xu Zhaoshan wasn't familiar with all of the corpses in all of the corpse caves, but as soon as he saw this one, he whispered, "This guy got killed by that shrew Shui Mei." The fact that he died fighting her indicates that he must have had an extraordinary cultivation base when he was alive. Bai Xiaochun peered over at the corpse and the mark on its forehead. Immediately, his heart went cold. Obviously, on Corpse Peak, we focus on corpses, Xu Zhaoshan continued. Generally speaking, the corpses start out ordinary and slowly advance through the levels until they reach the pinnacle. The levels are as follows: Pallid Zombie, Shadow Zombie, Flying Ghoul, Grand Lich. Your mission is to get this corpse to grow white hair. Then it will turn from an ordinary corpse into a pallid zombie. The method to do so is explained in this jade slip. Considering you're in the 10th level of Qi condensation and have been around for a while, you've probably heard a bit about how it works. Use your cultivation base to catalyze the blood cistern, and then sink the corpse down inside. Of course, there are a lot of other details you have to master. If you work quickly, you can accomplish the task in half a year. With that, he handed Bai Xiaochun 2 jade slips. One of them contained information about the corpse refining methods, and the other could be used to control the corpse itself. Then, he turned to leave. Bai Xiaochun didn't want to waste that much time, though. Looking over at the corpse, he asked, "Is there any way to get it to go faster?" Xu Zhaoshan chuckled coldly. "Faster? Of course. If you give the corpse enough spirit medicine, then naturally the process will go faster. In fact, if you're good enough, maybe you could make a 9 Serenities blood pill. With one of those, you could finish within 10 days. Plus, the corpse would be a Grand Lich, about as powerful as a patriarch. I forgot that you can actually do a bit of medicine concocting. Maybe you should give it a shot." He chuckled again. Bloodstream sect disciples usually spent their time fighting, and most viewed medicine concocting as a waste of time. Xu Zhaoshan flicked his sleeve and left Bai Xiaochun alone in the corpse cave. Bai Xiaochun looked down thoughtfully at the corpse floating in the cistern, and soon, his eyes lit up. They didn't like me concocting pills in the spirit stream sect, but now I'm in the bloodstream sect. I can finally do some pill concocting again. Becoming a grand apothecary really was proving to be a big headache. He sighed. Years from now, I can proudly tell my descendants that Bai Xiaochun walked a long, winding path. He raised beasts in the spirit stream sect, and concocted medicine in the bloodstream sect. Bai Xiaochun really felt proud of himself. Considering how hard he was working, if he didn't become a Grand Master apothecary and concoct a live forever never die pill, it would be really unfair. However, I need to be careful. This isn't the spirit stream sect. These people are brutal. If I provoke them because of my medicine concocting, they probably won't just throw rocks, they'll attack with magical items. That thought got him so nervous that he began to hesitate. After more thought, he gritted his teeth, and his eyes shone with determination. If I want to become the greatest apothecary in the world, if I want to live forever and exist for all eternity, then how could I let this trifling bloodstream sect stop me? I'm definitely gonna concoct some pills. Bring it on. When the Tao of medicine is involved, Bai Xiaochun isn't afraid of anyone. Although his expression seemed cold and sinister, he was really gritting his teeth and throwing caution to the wind. He didn't want to be stuck in the corpse cave staring at a corpse for any longer than he had to. He had no interest in such things. Therefore, he would use his abilities with spirit medicine to reduce the time it took to accomplish the mission. Then he could leave Corpse Peak once and for all. After studying the mission jade slip for a while, he began to chuckle darkly. All I have to do is get the corpse to grow white hair, right? Simple. I just need to concoct a medicinal incense that grows hair. In the bloodstream sect, any corpse that grew white hair was a pallid zombie. That was common knowledge. Never before had there been an ordinary zombie with white hair. Bai Xiaochun rubbed his chin thoughtfully as he looked at the blood-colored water in the cistern and the corpse. Then he sat down cross-legged and began to mentally review all of the medicine formulas he knew. It was essentially impossible to use medicinal pills to solve the problem with the corpse. He had to concoct medicinal incense. Upon burning it, a smoke would appear which would merge into the corpse and transform it. A few days later, his eyes were already completely bloodshot. He was pacing back and forth in the corpse cave, coming up with one idea after another. Some ideas he immediately discarded, others he spent time analyzing in detail. He even asked Night Crypt about the types of medicinal ingredients they had in the Bloodstream sect, and was surprised to find that many of them weren't known in the Spirit Stream sect. Using some of Night Crypt's few merit points, he went and purchased some ingredients, especially the ones that were unique to the Bloodstream sect. He was pleasantly surprised to find that prices for ingredients were much lower here. Apparently, the Bloodstream sect did that to encourage disciples to work on medicine concocting, although it did little good. To Bloodstream sect disciples, medicine concocting would only take away time from all the fighting they did, and would waste a lot of resources. Why do so much work when they could simply go out and rob other people? 7 days passed. After doing plenty of research to understand how to use Bloodstream sect medicinal plants together with Spirit Stream sect medicinal plants, he finally came up with his unique medicinal formula. It had only one function: grow white hair. His idea was simple. It didn't matter whether the corpse was fundamentally strong or weak, his mission was simply to get it to grow white hair. Although he wasn't sure how strong the corpse would be afterward, that didn't really matter to him. He did 2 more days of mental work to ensure that the medicine formula was perfect. Then, just after evening fell, he opened his eyes and excitedly produced a pill furnace. Taking out 2 earth flame crystals, he started working on a batch of Tier 3 medicinal incense. 2 months went by. Other people who were working on corpses were already seeing transformations begin. However, Bai Xiaochun's corpse hadn't made any progress at all. Of course, he didn't care about that, he was completely engrossed in his medicine concocting. In the Bloodstream sect, people didn't generally spend a lot of time interacting with each other. During the more than 2 months that he'd been in the corpse cave, not a single person had come in to speak with him, which was fine as far as he was concerned. He had failed numerous times to produce a single batch of Tier 3 medicinal incense, and every time he did, he would analyze everything carefully and then start over. Occasionally, rumbling sounds would echo out, but considering Bai Xiaochun's current skill in the Tao of medicine, he was very comfortable with Tier 3 spirit medicines. Although he failed, there were no catastrophic side effects that would cause chaos in the area. 3 more days passed. Bai Xiaochun excitedly slapped the pill furnace, and rumbling sounds echoed out as it opened to reveal a palm-sized chunk of black incense. After pulling it out, he held it in his hand and looked at it suspiciously. The black incense didn't emit any medicinal aroma, and seemed ordinary in nature. Bai Xiaochun scratched his head. After all the adjustments he'd made to the formula, this was the final result, but he wasn't sure exactly what kind of medicinal incense it was. It should work. I put plenty of corpse friend flower in, as well as some roddenroot grass. I used all kinds of medicinal plants that are good for upgrading corpses. He looked at the incense, then glanced at the corpse in the blood cistern. If he were in the Spirit Stream sect, he wouldn't dare to test it out, but considering he was just working with a corpse, he wasn't too worried about anything happening. It will definitely work. Taking a deep breath, he pushed his hands together and then unleashed some spiritual power, creating an invisible fire which lit the incense. As the smoke rose up, he waved his hand, sending the incense over to the corpse. It immediately fused into it, causing smoke to roil out and fill the entire cistern. When he saw all the smoke, Bai Xiaochun sprinted out of the corpse cave, and out of the entire corpse refinery in general. He didn't dare to remain behind and accidentally breathe in some of the incense, which could have led to a bigger disaster. He spent the rest of the day strolling through the sect, until he was sure enough time had passed. Under the cover of night, he snuck back to the corpse cave. Only after confirming that there was no more smoke present did he edge forward toward the cistern. The first thing he saw was that the smoke was indeed all gone. The red color of the water had faded a bit, and red hair could be seen on the corpse's head. It was really a frightening sight, and made the corpse look even more murderous than before. Red hair? Eyes wide, he stepped a bit closer to the corpse. Suddenly, he felt like he wasn't alone in the room. At the same time, the corpse's eyes snapped open, and they were as red as blood. There was no life in those eyes, they were ice cold, almost as if death itself were looking at him. Radiating an intensely cold aura, the corpse began to rise to its feet. Scalp tingling in shock, Bai Xiaochun backed up and pulled out the jade slip that could be used to control the corpse. After pushing his finger down onto it, the zombie slowly went still. After making sure that it really wasn't moving, he edged closer again to look at the red hair. Scowling, he said, "Xu Zhaoshan talked about zombies with white hair and black hair. He didn't say anything about red hair. Does red hair count?" Feeling a bit of a headache coming on, he gritted his teeth. It doesn't matter. There's obviously a problem with my medicine formula. A few changes will definitely get this zombie's hair to turn white. Sitting down cross-legged, he began to think about the problem in detail. A few days later, he looked tired, but slapped his thigh in excitement. It must be a problem with the water in the cistern. The water changed color because the zombie absorbed the redness. The more he thought about it, the more it made sense. Without any further hesitation, he began concocting. He changed the formula this time, adding in quite a few different medicinal plants. This time, he didn't just create medicinal incense, but a medicinal pill as well. A few days later, it was with great excitement and anticipation that he threw a medicinal pill into the blood cistern. As soon as the medicinal pill entered the cistern, it sank down into the water. Moments later, the water began to bubble and churn, and huge bubbles popped up everywhere. As it did, Bai Xiaochun tossed out the piece of incense, which landed onto the red-haired zombie. This time, he didn't leave, although he did back up a bit. Smoke filled the cistern, and gurgling sounds began to emanate from within. Then an inhuman howl echoed out, something that sounded almost like it came out of the mouth of an evil ghost or vile fiend. A few hours later, the smoke began to clear, and Bai Xiaochun peered over to try to see into the cistern. Change to white hair. Come on, change, change. Even as he murmured, the smoke cleared, and he hurried over to the edge of the cistern. As soon as he laid eyes on the zombie, a blank look appeared in his eyes. Violet hair? The zombie in the cistern no longer had red hair, but violet. Its murderous aura was even stronger, and much of the water in the cistern had been drained. Moments later, more blood-colored water rushed in to fill the cistern back up. Most shocking of all was that the violet hair was fully 3 inches long, much longer than the red hair had been. Furthermore, the zombie's fingers now sported long, sharp claws. What is this thing? Bai Xiaochun murmured, eyes wide. The zombie certainly looked a lot more impressive, so he asked Imposter Nightcrypt about it. However, Imposter Nightcrypt had never heard of any zombie like this either. He hesitated for a bit, and even though about going to ask Xu Zhaoshan to come take a look. But then he thought about the mystery pills that had often emerged when he concocted medicine, and his expression flickered. Could it be something to do with the incense? He thought for a moment about all of the bizarre animals he'd let loose in the spirit stream sect, and shivered. I can definitely turn its hair white. Taking a deep breath, he gritted his teeth and began concocting. Bai Xiaochun continued to produce one type of incense after another. The zombie's hair went from violet to pink, then from pink to orange. At one point it even turned blue. But never white. Furthermore, the hair grew longer and longer with each transformation. By the time it turned blue, it was 1/3 of a meter long. Simultaneously, the zombie's murderous aura grew stronger and stronger, and its claws became even sharper. 2 dangerous-looking fangs appeared in its mouth, and its skin changed color along with its hair. The water in the cistern was drained over and over again, whereupon it would naturally refill. Half a year went by, and Bai Xiaochun stood at the edge of the cistern. He had stared at the zombie so many times that he was starting to go crazy. I refuse to believe that I'll fail. Bai Xiaochun was getting really mad. He stood there facing off with the zombie, filled with frustration that it just wouldn't turn white. Spinning around, he began to throw medicinal plants into the pill furnace, including special bloodstream sect plants. Changing the pill formula once more, he began to madly devote himself to concocting. His hair was in complete disarray, and he had already forgotten that he wasn't in the spirit stream sect. He was completely immersed in concocting medicine to the point of bedeviled madness. His eyes burned red, and even Imposter Nightcrypt's soul was trembling. He almost felt like he was back in the fallen sword world, and didn't dare to interrupt Bai Xiaochun in even the smallest way. This Bai Xiaochun is crazy, he thought. As Bai Xiaochun worked on his new spirit medicine, Xu Zhaoshan was in another location in the corpse refinery, dejectedly pondering a certain issue that had cropped up over the past half-year or so. For some reason, the corpse refining blood serum in his corpse refinery was draining away much more quickly than usual. What's going on? He thought. It was quite a headache to investigate the matter, considering that there were over 1,000 corpses being refined at any given time. In any case, the blood serum drainage rate was still within acceptable limits. Whatever. I guess it just means that I'll be able to upgrade my corpse refinery sooner than expected. With that, he put the matter aside. A month later, Bai Xiaochun was there in the corpse cave, looking at the pill furnace and cackling. He had even poured his own blood into the mixture to make this batch of medicinal incense. Hopefully, his blood would incite the blood chi of the enormous hand to produce shocking transformations. He slapped the side of the pill furnace, and a pungent smoke poured out, which he waved to the side. When he saw the fingernail-sized chunk of white incense inside, he threw his head back and laughed uproariously. This time it will definitely turn white. He carefully picked the incense up to examine it closely. Although it was very small, it was actually more powerful than any of the other types of incense he had produced up to this point. In fact, not even the strength of all the previous chunks of incense added together could equal this one. At long last, I will produce my pallid zombie, he roared. Waving his hand, he sent the fingernail-sized chunk of incense flying toward the corpse. It instantly shot through all the hair to land on the zombie's forehead, where it began to burn, releasing a dense white smoke. The smoke spread out rapidly, and in response, Bai Xiaochun shot backward. At a certain point, it stopped expanding, but was so thick that nothing was visible inside of it. However, indescribably terrifying howls could be heard echoing out. Somehow, there even seemed to be a bit of joy within the howls. Bai Xiaochun was starting to get even more excited than before. Meanwhile, Xu Zhaoshan was in his room in the corpse refinery, looking very anxious as he stood in front of an old man, who was sitting there on one of the chairs in the room, staring at him coldly. The old man wore a voluminous gray robe that was embroidered with the image of a mountain peak. If you looked closely, it was none other than Corpse Peak. A vicious zombie face could be seen on the sleeve of the old man's robe, which looked extremely realistic as he flicked his sleeve. The old man had disheveled hair, and his face was covered with scars, but he radiated an intense life force. Apparently, his true age was different than his appearance made him out to be. His cultivation base wasn't in the gold core stage, but he was at the very peak of foundation establishment, and in fact, was already in the quasi-core stage. He was only a sliver away from reaching core formation. Xu Zhaoshan cleared his throat and hurriedly explained, "Grand Elder, don't I still have some time left?" "Don't worry. Xu Zhaoshan, have been taking care of this corpse refinery for almost a year now. How could I not pay the spirit stones I owe? In 3 months, the first batch of zombies will be ready, and I'll pay you back, both principal and interest." He had never imagined that the Grand Elder of Corpse Peak would personally come to ask him about the expenses related to the corpse refinery. "Elder Xu," the Grand Elder said, "I truly hope that you will do as you say. If the time comes and you don't pay what you owe, it won't matter that you have a patriarch backing you. I'll still hold you accountable for the losses." With that, Corpse Peak's Grand Elder turned to leave. But then, the door suddenly slammed open, and a flustered young man burst in. "What gall?" Xu Zhaoshan barked, looking over with a grim face. Just when he'd managed to get the Grand Elder off his back, this flunky barged in to cause problems. However, even as his killing intent raged, he noticed how terrified the young man looked. "Young lord, something really bad is happening. Almost 30% of the corpse refining blood serum has vanished, all at once." The ashen-faced young man seemed on the verge of tears. He was responsible for keeping the records regarding the corpse refining blood serum, and when he saw such a massive reduction, he wasn't sure what to do. It was only when he finished speaking that he noticed that young Lord Xu Zhaoshan wasn't alone. The old man in the room seemed a bit familiar, and when he looked at him more closely, his mind suddenly began to reel. GG Grand Elder. When Xu Zhaoshan heard what was happening, his scalp began to tingle so hard it felt like it might explode. 30%? He asked, eyes turning bloodshot. He immediately raced out to check the blood serum altar. As for the Grand Elder, he looked completely taken aback. Even at a critical point in the corpse refining process, there would never be such a drastic loss in blood serum, not unless an incredibly powerful zombie were being produced. A 30% loss? He thought. Without hesitation, he burst into motion. Soon, Xu Zhaoshan was at the blood serum altar. There, a huge blood cistern could be seen with over 1,000 channels leading out into different corpse caves. As soon as Xu Zhaoshan appeared, the disciples in charge of the altar looked over. Ashen-faced, they clasped hands in greeting. Xu Zhaoshan didn't even hear them talking. He stared down into the huge cistern, thinking back to the day before, when it had been mostly full. But now, half of that amount was gone. How is this possible? He thought, beginning to tremble. The blood serum had to be purchased at significant cost, and what he was seeing in front of his own eyes caused his vision to begin to fade. But then, he watched as almost all of the remaining serum drained away, revealing the bottom of the cistern and leaving it completely empty. All of the blood serum could be seen flowing into one particular channel. That leads to Night Crypt's corpse cave. Bursting with a murderous aura, he let out a howl of rage and sped away from the blood serum altar and toward Bai Xiaochun's corpse cave. In that very corpse cave, Bai Xiaochun was watching as the white smoke began to clear. Heart bursting with joy, he was just about to take a step forward when suddenly, his face fell, and his eyes went wide with disbelief. "What's going on?" he said. He rubbed his eyes, not daring to believe what he was seeing. There within the white smoke were numerous green hairs, twisting and turning as they floated in the air. Some of them were actually boring into the walls of the cave. Bai Xiaochun felt his scalp tingling. He quickly opened his third eye and looked into the smoke. As of this moment, the cistern wasn't even visible anymore, nor was the corpse. All he saw was a huge, green hairball. The hair wasn't just spreading out to fill the corpse cave, some of it had pierced into the walls, and was spreading out to who knew where. Is that hair? Bai Xiaochun thought, backing up as fast as possible, his mind spinning. In that very moment, cries of shock and alarm began to ring out from the more than 1,000 other corpse caves. What's going on? Heavens! What happened? What are these green strands? Damn it! What are these green strands doing in my corpse cave? It was then that a massive rumbling sound rose up that could shake heaven and earth, filling the entire corpse refinery. The corpse caves began to collapse as green strands of hair raced in. Next, the green hair pierced into the bodies of the zombies that were still in the middle of being produced. Then, the hair on those zombies' heads began to turn green, even the ones that already had white hair. But that was nothing. Some of the hair stabbed into the ground. It couldn't go very deep though, so it would pop out of the ground some distance away before stabbing back in. Xu Zhaoshan watched in shock as the corpse refinery began to fall to pieces. Furthermore, the trees in the area were all starting to grow green hair as well, as were the rocks, plants, flowers, and other buildings. Everything was turning green. As the corpse refinery collapsed, more green hair appeared and spread out in all directions. Countless disciples appeared, fleeing with looks of shock and terror on their faces. What is this stuff? My refined corpse. I worked for 2 years on that thing. Now those green strands showed up and turned it green. Who did this? As people began to cry out in madness, a look of terror appeared on Bai Xiaochun's face. He flew out of the corpse cave, leaving behind an exploding mass of green hair. Night Crypt, what did you do? Xu Zhaoshan bellowed, shaking in anger. As soon as the words left his mouth, everyone in the area turned to look at Bai Xiaochun. Bai Xiaochun knew that, yet again, he had provoked a catastrophe. Heart-pounding with fear, he let out a miserable shriek and then said, "What is that stuff? Damn it, who did this? My refined corpse. I've been working hard on it for half a year." Everyone around him stared at him in shock. "How dare you try to trick an elder like me? You're dead." Xu Zhaoshan's eyes flickered with killing intent as he cackled in rage. Waving his hand, he sent the power of his earth-string spiritual seas into motion. Tideflow power erupted out, along with a raging murderous aura. In the blink of an eye, deadly fluctuations were racing toward Bai Xiaochun. Not a single person did anything to prevent what was happening. As for the Grand Elder of Corpse Peak, he merely frowned. Bai Xiaochun's face fell. He couldn't simply reveal his true cultivation base, but if he didn't, then based on Night Crypt's current level of power, this attack should kill him beyond the shadow of a doubt. However, even in Bai Xiaochun's moment of terror, countless howls began to rise up from the corpse caves. Something very strange was happening. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.